I am going to move on to the next segment, which is a panel, but we're going to make it interactive. So it's really a conversation with the audience. So I know that there's more people that want to jump in, and we'll certainly make that happen. But let me invite to the stage to join me Ms. Shanaaz Preena, who is Director of Women Go Beyond and Women's Advocacy at Mass Holdings. Shanaaz, are you here? Oh, there she is. Ms. Alice Law, who's CEO of CTG Global and a member of the steering committee of the Global Compact Network UAE. Thank you, Alice. And Ms. Vineeta Tikekar, am I saying that right? Or close enough? Who is a marketing director at Sodexo. And Mr. Rishi Singh, who is a business transformation expert and a close friend of the Global Compact, I could say, right? And we need some mics up here, actually. Yeah, perfect. I'm going to join you over here. So maybe all the bios for our speakers are in the mobile application, but maybe we can just do a very quick hello and who you are and an introduction. And I'll pass the mic this way.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm Shanaaz Preena from MAS Holdings in Sri Lanka. MAS Holdings is a $1.6 billion US dollar company which commenced in 1987, owned by three brothers, still owned by them, with 82,000 employees, 70% of them being females. And I am in charge of the Women's Empowerment Program, which was started not because somebody told them to, but because the owners, the shareholders felt that there was a responsibility and it was the right thing to do. At the time they started, it was 90% females. And of all the jobs that I've held, this job is the one that I have found self-actualization.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you for inviting me on this panel today. I wanted to just tell a little story, and it's not about gender-based violence, but it's about the dangers of women who work in fragile and conflict-affected countries that I work in. Back in 2003, when I first went to Iraq, I was working in a secure compound of all men. I was the only woman. And we had this female cleaning staff who came in. Now, they found me amazing. They came up and they touched my skin and my hair, and they kept bringing me water and sweets they'd made from home. And I don't think they'd ever seen a white-haired, blue-eyed white woman before in their life. Now, horrifically, one morning they didn't turn up for work, and they had been the subject of a terrorist attack, and their vehicle had hit an IED. And now these were just local women who had found a right to work. They probably had no political afflictions, and they were just earning a living for their families. It's something that happens with people who work in the fragile countries that I work in. I have another lady who works for me in Somalia now. When she first went back to Somalia, not with CTG, she was the subject of not one, but two threats against her. And she went back home to England. She was a British-born and raised Somali. And she decided that actually the threats that were against her were less important to her than the requirement for her to go and help on important humanitarian matters. She now works for my company, CTG, as advisor on the political situation of Somalia to the United Nations. A really, really important job. So that's just a little bit of an introduction into some of the amazing women that I have working for me in my company. Well, not the Iraqis, they were with another company. But I have ladies who work for me in Gaza who are civil engineers. I have ladies who work for me in Afghanistan. In fact, we've just started a Female First program, of which our local office in Afghanistan have really had the initiative behind, where they asked for a slightly bigger budget so they could hire 2 women into their completely male-dominated office. They had to create a separate office for these ladies. They had to make sure they had separate bathrooms, and they had to pay for a family member to chaperone them and to work every day. And on top of that, they also had to persuade their fathers, their brothers, their husbands that these ladies should actually have a right to work. These are some of the amazing ladies I have working for me. And I think it's really, really important that women have the right to work. Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a long introduction, but...
That was a nice introduction. Hi, I'm Vineeta from Sodexo. I look after marketing for Asia Pacific. And at Sodexo, we believe in the mission of quality of life. And we want to make a difference in quality of life to every life that we touch. And to that extent, while marketing is my day job, I would say I get a lot of opportunities to work with communities, work with women, work on the D&I issue, and that's extremely satisfying. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Must compliment Vibha on inspiring us. It's been such great, I think, past 15 minutes. Just sometimes had shivers back my spine, what's happening in our country. So my work has been focused on gender equality, although my background has been in manufacturing and operations. And after 2012, I thought this was the way we could transform businesses and bring in more operational sense of adding positive impacts to the society as large. So my core work still remains advising businesses, transforming them, and focusing on now implementing SDGs and the UN guiding principles.
Thank you, Rishi. So maybe actually before I get started, I was going to pitch this question to our speakers, but I'm going to pitch it to the audience instead and ask, when you look around your workplace, when you look around your communities and your countries, who is at risk of being left behind? So we heard about women and girls, which is, as I mentioned, one of the most, gender discrimination is one of the most prevalent forms of discrimination that there is. Who else do we need to be thinking about? Any takers? Yes. Do we have another mic that we can bring over?
Hello, everybody. I come from the academic world, so please correct me if I'm wrong. And this is a group that's predominantly corporates, along with civil and social activists. I would say that the people we leave behind are what we call the invisible stakeholders. So, for example, let's take the security guards. People who are typically not employees of a firm, but they are the employees of a, say, contractual firm. When we walk in and walk out, do we even look at them? Throughout the year, there are so many activities that are held, but we find that this is one segment that gets ignored. Another example would be, say, gardening staff. Now, I'm getting really into the details here, but you find that all around us, there are people working with us to make our lives better, but we don't even realize it. So to my mind, when we say marginalized, let's talk of gender inclusion. We're talking of, say, the grade 4 staff members in India, where we don't even see them. So even if you say women, in women there are lots of categories. And similarly, there are many others. So that would be my take on it.
Exactly, yep. Another suggestion here.
Sure, I'm not sure I got her name right, but I work in maternal and newborn health, and we see that one of the biggest issues in institutions in India is we basically forget the cleaning staff in delivery rooms, and that's one of the biggest jobs that's very important for a safe and hygienic delivery, and it's very, very difficult to recruit people to clean labor wards. And I think that's definitely a segment where there is an invisible population that we forget, and that's something that we need to progress. But otherwise, I feel in gender equality, and hats off to Vibha to kind of create a movie around sons. I would not be speaking here if not the support from my dad and my granddad and my husband and my sons. But I definitely think it's men whom we leave behind in a gender equality conversation, and that's something I think we should definitely look forward to, bringing more responsible men to take this issue forward.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm Ramesh Sharma. I'm an executive director from Legacy Services, which provides IT-enabled compliance management solutions. This is the second hat I'm wearing after my retirement, and Vibha will be surprised to know that I'm an IPS. I was an IPS officer, and I retired as the Director General of Police of Madhya Pradesh. So, Viva, indeed, I think you have done a great job. And what I liked most about your approach, and which is what exactly I felt throughout the 35 years of my experience as a police officer, is that the police officer does not descend upon the heaven on the earth. He goes through the same society, the same social values, the same cultural values, and he imbibes them. And just by joining the police, those values don't change. So indeed, I'm very happy to note that you have not started on a blame game, because that doesn't help anybody. But the main problem, as rightly identified, is that socially and culturally and economically, these are the three levels at which this issue of at least gender equality, or for that matter, financial inclusion of any section of the society which are deprived, has to be tackled with. Now, in fact, I do not know, after Nirbhaya incident, there were very strict laws passed. I'm quite aware, and you must be also aware, the laws have been made, rape laws and assault on women laws have been made very, very rigid and with very, very stringent incarcerations. But law is law. I mean, still rapes will happen, murders will happen, dacoities will happen. It's been happening in the past, it will happen now, it will happen in the future also. But as a movement, or as government as a stakeholder, which is the biggest stakeholder in this matter, I think the matter needs to be taken up much more seriously at the social level, at the societal level. As you mentioned about Kap Panchayat, I mean, somehow the other politics and social issues get mixed up just for votes, and therefore the issues get left behind. I think socially we have to have a movement which has to be sponsored and led by the government, and absolutely with a clear-cut roadmap.
Yep.
And that is how we should be able to bring about a change in the mindset of the people.
And we're going to come
Thank
to
you.
that. We're going to talk a little bit about partnerships in just a minute. Let me turn back to the panel, and I want to ask you, so when we're talking about inclusion, definitely gender equality, and this is going to be top of mind, which I'm thrilled about having that being the focus of my work for the last little bit. But even beyond gender equality, persons with disabilities, LGBT, we have Vanessa in the room from our local network in Brazil who's doing some amazing work with refugees and migrants. There's lots of people that are left behind, and there's already ways that businesses are taking efforts to create more inclusion within their workplaces, but also their society. So maybe, Rishi, I can start with you and move down this way to see if anybody has any examples to offer.
Yeah, I just wanted to, since this is a business forum and we're talking about business as change makers, the question about who's left behind has very limited value for a business till the time the business does not know its impacts on the society and the community. And that is where I think businesses need more help and assistance. And the human rights impact assessment is actually one way of understanding what impacts a business makes throughout its value chain. And I think then only it's very clear who's left behind in the business context and what businesses should do. Otherwise, the writing is on the wall, in terms of who's left behind. It is not, we have a friend who's from the academics here. She can give, I'm sure, thousands of studies to tell who's left behind. So from a business point of view, I think it's very important that businesses understand clearly what are their human rights impacts in the value chain. And I think then only, the whole conversation and debate gets the value of it. And there are obviously numerous examples, which I'll come later and just pass it on the mic.
And just, Rishi, I think that's a really important point, that the discussion on discrimination, this is a human rights issue too. And there's certainly things that businesses can do above and beyond their responsibilities, but there is a fundamental responsibility that business has on the principle of non-discrimination. So thanks for bringing that up.
So when we look at diversity from a moral perspective, it's important because when we talk about companies moving ahead, we can't move ahead in a responsible and sustainable manner by leaving half the population out. But I think more than the moral case, when we look at businesses, the businesses is about growth, it's about making money. And out there, I think there's also a case for change, for being more inclusive when it comes to driving diversity. At Sodexo, we believe that diversity is a business imperative. It is, it's not just sexy to be diverse, but it's also important because when we look at diversity, we talk about having consumers who have women who take the decisions in 70% of the cases. And when we look at making decisions or creating products or services for the entire audience, we realize that the teams are not diverse enough. So to be able to create the right products and services, it is important to have a diverse team. Besides that, we've also looked at measurement of how diversity impacts business. So we conducted a research across 100 of our subsidiaries, and we looked at how diversity impacted 6 parameters, and these parameters were across the brand image, consumer satisfaction, client retention, growth, profitability. And we saw that businesses which were a lot more diverse and we were much better in all the indicators. And we found that the sweet spot was around 40 to 60%. So that means that the businesses which had women, and not just women, but also diversity to an extent of 40 to 60%, actually performed much better on very tangible indicators. So that clearly shows a very, very clear case to focus on this important imperative. Thank you.
Vineeta, should we actually pause here and show
I think
your
you should
video?
show the video, yes.
So we're jumping a little bit ahead on the business case, but we will return to Alice and Shanaaz as well. But the Sodexo has a great video that I think really drives home the business case for inclusion. And when we're thinking about scaling up action, I think it's important to be thinking of these drivers. There is, obviously, it's the right thing to do. It's a human rights responsibility, but I think businesses are often looking for the business case for action as well. Sadhvi, do we have that, yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
I think we're missing the sound.
Powerful.
Okay.
Open your eyes. I'm amazing.
My eyes are able to distinguish over 500 shades of any color.
Every inch of my skin has over 19 million cells.
My brain is more powerful than the most powerful computer ever made.
And each of us working for Sodexo is unique.
We each have a unique personality.
We interact in the world in a unique way.
Through our religion,
Our sexuality
our language and culture.
And this uniqueness
Is what we bring to Sodexo every day.
How do you see me? Does it bother you that I'm gay?
Or a woman.
What if I'm black? Does that make a difference?
Do you see the wheelchair before you see me? How does that make you feel? And how does that make me feel?
When you see me, do you see someone over the hill or someone with wisdom and experience?
Do you understand why I take my religion seriously? Do you respect my beliefs? What if I work part-time? Am I less important?
If I can do my job, then who are you to judge me? Maybe I have knowledge that you don't have.
If you want everyone to be the same as you, the same outlook, the same views, then what sort of company would Sodexo be?
Look around us.
We represent the people we serve.
And because we value the unique quality of each of our people,
We can serve our clients better.
Sodexo employs thousands of part-timers.
We have many different languages, cultures,
religions,
People of different sexes and sexual orientation.
Physical ability.
and ages.
Diversity isn't just a legal requirement.
It's the key to the success of our business.
Being inclusive and open to diversity is grounded in our core values of team spirit,
service spirit, and spirit of progress. I'm amazing.
I am unique.
Together, we're better.
I am Sodexo.
It's a great video, right? Really drives home the business case. And just quickly, so is this a video that was used internally and externally? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, both internally and externally. Mainly it was used internally, but we used it also in a lot of external forums.
Thank you. Thank you.
And sorry, just one more thing. Here in the audience, we had some of the comments around invisible people. Mm-hmm. Here you see a lot of invisible people. And what we do is we make them believe that whatever they're doing is making a difference. So when someone is a chef behind the scenes, they're making a difference to the quality of life. They are making a difference to your nutrition. When there's someone out there gardening, they're not just gardening, they could be gardening at a campus, but they're making people learn better. So we do make a difference to invisible people as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Alice. And so, yeah, speak a little bit about your experience and what you're seeing in terms of business action towards inclusion, and if you have any insights on what's driving that action.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to comment on the Sodexo video just quickly, because that actually had me thinking a little bit about what we're doing internally and the people who work for us. As they are individuals. As I mentioned earlier, you know, we employ a lot of women. As I mentioned the girl in Somalia and Gaza and Afghanistan, and the ladies in Afghanistan. And, you know, actually our country manager in a lot of countries in Yemen, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Mali, are all women as well. And it's really amazing when you talk to these women, they actually have some pretty strong views on the whole gender subject and women being given the right to be able to work. And so we've basically engaged them to become champions of change, though we do have a male champion of change in Afghanistan, and to come forward, to come up with the ideas of things that local initiatives that we can have to drive responsible business in the countries that we work in. And in respect to sort of the subject matter of leaving anyone behind and the business case for it, and I kind of agree with Rishi on what does it mean for businesses, but I think if you take the whole SDGs, the SDGs are actually here to really address that matter. And I think if businesses align their, and business leaders align their strategies with the SDGs, and they're part of the UN Global Compact, which is a very good way to engage and report. I think that is really the step that the businesses can take to have a bit impact on the subject.
Great, thank you. Shanaaz, did you want to come in here as well?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the Sodexo video basically covers most of the people who should not be left behind, and that inclusive aspect comes in. I think the MA story was not really, it was not a conscious effort, but when MAs took employment to the villagers, there were so many educated young women, but they had no employment, they had no way of going, the infrastructure wasn't that good, and they couldn't leave the village and come and stay in places where there was employment because of the stigma attached to the apparel industry. I didn't mention that I come from the apparel industry, and we are a business that takes from design to delivery. And at the time it started, the stigma was so bad. I mean, people just didn't want to send their daughters out to this industry. So what MAS did was took it out to the village and gave them the opportunity, and not just an opportunity to work, but also an opportunity to rise in their career. They were given education in areas that they didn't know. So it's not just, I mean, it's not exploitation. Basically, here is a group that doesn't have employment, and then they're included, but then where does it stop? It doesn't stop there. Those women are respected, and they are given, they're empowered. That's the Women Go Beyond program. That's what it does. Educate them on aspects that they didn't know before, behavioral aspects, things that are not taught in schools. And then we also found that these people sometimes they didn't turn up at work, and then when you really speak to them, they say, well, I have a person, a sister or a mother who I have to take care of because she has a disability. And the responsibility lies again with the girl child most often. And so when it came to that, we found a way of including those people. So when we asked her if we gave that person employment, would that help you in any way? Yes, of course, there was not one. There were so many of our employees who had people with disabilities, siblings or relatives with disabilities whom they were responsible for. So then it evolved through that, and then with Marks and Spencer coming on board with the Marks and Start program, we did a very structured way in which we trained these people. We took them on board, there were applications, we interviewed them, and the biggest problem was infrastructure. So they couldn't get to the workplace, and that was another reason why they couldn't really find employment. So we went out of our way to do that, and we have more than 480 people, and they have stuck with us, and they have progressed in their careers, and they have found their talent, hidden talents that they didn't know existed because they were not given a chance. So that is not the only thing. We have designers, and very often they are inclined, they are gay, or they have different sexual orientation. And they are the most creative people. We don't discriminate them saying that they are inclined, their sexual orientation is not what you and I might think it's right or wrong, because that's what we judge. And the inclusivity comes in, again, we want like-minded people, people like us whom we recruit. So when you take on people like that, there's so much more, there's a different perspective that comes into the organization. We start thinking in different ways, and we don't see them as them and us. It is kind of, it's all included. So these programs that we have, it has evolved over a period of time. And when we started, it was not really for the business case. I mean, I slightly differ from what you say in that, but actually it turned out to be a very positive initiative for the business. And it has really taken on, and the contribution made, especially with people with disabilities. I mean, they're so committed. They don't want to take their leave. Their productivity is so high. And it's just that they're so thankful for having been included.
Yeah, so you're seeing difference as a strength.
Yes.
Very powerful. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what the roadblocks are then. If business knows that this makes good business sense and that there's a moral and ethical reason to be driving inclusion, what is holding us back? Because I dare to say that all workplaces are not inclusive, all societies are not inclusive. It's certainly the case. So I think maybe even going back to Vipa's film, there's this issue of bias and stereotype and norms and mindsets that, at least we know from the gender equality space, is something that is maybe a little bit more nuanced to tackle. So maybe I can open it to the audience for your thoughts on that too. If we have some policies, we have practices, we have good examples, why aren't we moving quickly enough, and how do we fast track that? There's one at the back there, and the woman in the shawl here. If you don't mind just introducing yourself as well.
Okay.
Yeah, there it goes.
Okay, I'll start again. My name is Marcia Beliciano. I'm Director of Corporate Responsibility for Relax Group. We're a media and information provider. And I am hugely inspired by what I see, not to take anything away from the accomplishments of Mr. Singh on the panel today, but so many women leaders in the rooms. And I'm just wondering, one of the challenges that we have is our intake is about 50% women at the early stages of their career, and as we know, as women progress to the higher levels, it really thins. So what in the experience of our women leaders on the panel has been their key to success? And I think your advice would be very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. The pipeline barriers. Should we take one more question, and then maybe we can, or comment, and then we'll come back to our...
Hi, I'm Shiny. I'm a research professional. I work on gender and equity. So actually, the thing is, at times just stating that we are inclusive as employers is not enough, and you have to provide some institutional support, such as if you're considering inclusivity in the sense of the bare minimum, including women, we have at times to provide the institutional support is that women have a lot of unpaid work and care responsibilities, and those need to be taken into account. Just like Alice mentioned that for women in Afghanistan, they had to provide separate bathrooms, and even for separate chaperones, certain institutional support systems are required for women to continue work. And that's what we have found in our research in the informal economy. I work with women who are home-based workers or domestic workers, and what the main problem is they don't think so much as to the health impact of their precarious work conditions. It's more about they want to make more money, and for that they need more work, and they're limited because there is no institutional support, infrastructural support, there is nothing. So I think that's one of the roadblocks.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It certainly can't be only the private sector that is, making this change. There is a need for all sectors and all stakeholders to be involved in achieving inclusion. Did anybody want to come in on that point, or also Marcia's question around, how do you break through these the leadership pipeline and ensure that women actually make it to the top of organizations? Yeah, sure.
I actually got a bit of a funny story. Well, it's not really very funny, but when I kind of started my career and when I first came back from Iraq and I decided this is what I was going to do, and this is Marcia, hopefully going to answer your question. I had a guy turn around to me and goes, "Oh, well, you're not really going to get very far in this industry because, quite frankly, you're in a man's world." And that I had no real place to work in fragile and conflict-affected countries because it was dangerous. That was a little bit like red rag to a bull. And shortly after that, I was growing CTG from a startup in Afghanistan to operating in 25 of the most dangerous countries in the world. So I very much believe there's a place for a woman in any working environment. And I think as something that we've done internally to prevent any discrimination against women or anything else, is we've created a sort of salary banding structure and a clearly defined career progression plan so that everyone knows sort of really where they sit and what their entry-level salary and benefits will be, depending on what role they're in the company, not on who they are. And so there's entry level, there's mid-level, there's an exit level, there's KPIs that they can meet in order to achieve this, and there is a clear progression plan right from the most junior person in the office right up to my job, so that everyone basically has a fair and equal position in the company.
I would like to comment on that, even on Marcia's question in particular. I think at MAS, we have 20% in management. We are not happy with it. And the Hoshin from the chairman comes down that we have to keep increasing it. And our goal by 2030 is to have 1:1, 2020 actually. Not 2025 is to have at least 1:1, but that's a long process. We have networking, we have policies in place, we have all that. I mean, you name it, from people would say the structure, the policies, the creche facilities, all these things. But again, we need behavior changes, and I think that comes, a lot of us, including all of us speaking here, I think we all have unconscious biases which have to be addressed, and the nudging that has to take place. I'm sure, Lauren, you will take it beyond that. But I would also like to say that the opportunity for people who have started off as machine operators, team members, unskilled. And if I say that there are people who have moved up to become general managers and plant managers of our different plants, managing over 2,000 people, and running the business very independently, making decisions on their own. It's a whole process of education, and it's a whole process of acceptance and focused training and guidance that has to be given to them. And main thing was that people lacked the skill. English language was a huge barrier to their progress. IT skills, they didn't have access to it. And there were people with just 2 marks less to enter university, but they didn't have the money to pursue their education. So what our organization did was progressively gave them what they didn't have, and developed them leadership skills that were given, and they were given responsibility. Then with MOS, or we call it the MAS Operating Systems Training, which is like the lean management system education, and they were given programs that really empowered them. They could stop a line. If they felt that something was wrong, they could stop a line. They had the PDCAs, they would go out and decide. And these were ordinary girls from the village. And they have progressed to become managers and general managers in the organization. We are still not happy with the numbers. And the other thing we did was there were certain things that most of it was the soft skills. Most of the women would progress in HR, in human resource management, or in finance. But very often the operational technical jobs were not taken up by the women. And most often the positions that were in higher levels needed that kind of skill. And when you didn't have a lot of engineers coming on board, we did make a concerted effort to recruit engineers, but at the same time, like cutting and mechanics and electrical engineering jobs, we train them in that area. So we have female mechanics, we have female cutters, we have female technical experts, we have female electricians who then had the opportunity of progressing on a lateral line and then moving forward. On top of all of that, leadership development was also part of it. So wherever the gaps are, I think if you identify, I'm not saying we are 100% there, we need to get there, we're still not happy with the numbers.
And do you have new targets now?
Sorry?
Are you setting new targets?
Yeah, we have set new targets, and then we are working towards it. Even at this point in time, there is a leadership networking that is happening, and we have to seriously work, and the men have to get involved in pulling the people up. So the sponsorship that the men would give to pull them up, because without the men and the Women Go Beyond program would be nothing. So we are including the men on the program, and the men have to take us through along with them and see the benefit of having the women by their sides.
Thank you, Shanaaz.
So, sorry, when you talk about women, so when we get into the workforce, you see a fairly large number, to your point. There's a large number which come in. Then as you go up, you see the funnel narrowing. And that's a case that you see across. And to that end, at Sodexo, we've looked at a few things which have, I would say, worked to a large extent. There's still a lot that needs to be done. If you look at the numbers, at a global level, we have 40% of representation of women in the board. And our chairperson is a lady. And also, this message is driven from the top. It's driven from the CEO, Michelle Landell, who very clearly drives this message. And we have all the people in the management, and at 2 levels below that, we have diversity as a goal in our scorecard. So we are rated on that. So besides that, one thing is very clear, that not just in India, but across the globe, women do face different scenarios when they look at both at work and even home. So women are primary caregivers, and while a woman would come to the workforce, she's also expected to perform her duties at home. And I think that's globally. It's not just in India. What is important is to look at policies which help not just women, but I would say even men, to be flexible. And why is it important for men is because then the men help their wives, because it's not just about creating in your organization, but it's creating a society which is a lot more inclusive. So I'm happy to say that we have, I would say for India, we have a very, very good flexible working policy. And when we talk about flexible working, it's not just about implementing the policy. It's also important to drive people to use the policy, because a lot of times, especially when we look at successful people, as we term as successful, we say that we don't want people, they don't want to take those policies because it won't be viewed well. So while you create the policies, it's also important on how you look at driving the so-called bias around it. How do you look at treating it in a way that you can actually make a difference? And there's a lot of efforts done around that. And even men and women, both are encouraged to take this flexible working policies. And we've seen a tremendous improvement in their engagement levels and in their contribution. In fact, if I look at it in my team, I have a very senior lady who was pregnant, and when she got pregnant, she came to me and said, Vineeta, listen, I need to quit because I don't think I would be able to do justice. But then we gave her a flexible working policy where she would work 3 days a week out of home and 2 days limited hours at office. And I would say that her productivity and what she was delivering actually improved significantly with those reduced hours and with the flexibility of working from home. I think she's a fantastic example on that. And then we've promoted this forward, and we've talked to people that it is okay to do this, and you can still be successful and you can still be promoted when you take such flexibility. I think that's worked very well for us.
Thank you. Rishi, last but
We have some
certainly
time.
not
I just
least.
wanted to pitch in as a business advisor, and of course, it's a powerful story. So thank you for sharing those. And what I have seen is that one thing is very important is how empowered people behave towards those who are not empowered yet. And I think some people who get empowered sometimes get busy with their own lives, and that is essential to bringing everybody along. How we empowered people engage with people who have not received those benefits as we have. So I would put, the enablers as in 3 buckets. And one bucket is about business design. And, we have some matured companies sitting here, and, they are inspiration to other companies. However, other companies are not on that maturity level. And about business design, do they use the right filters when they design their business, and which includes everyone. It follows the philosophy of inclusion. It has built into its core philosophy and strategy that this business has to be inclusive. What we see normally, Lauren, is in businesses we advise, they use this sprinkler effect. The sprinkler effect of WEPs, Women Empowerment Principles, or the UN Guiding Principles. It's a very sprinkling thing. Okay, so let's do it because it might look good for our customers, or it's a PR or branding thing. It's not part of the core strategy of the business. And I'm so glad to hear, the businesses who are here, they really have that embedded into the business. The second bucket, I would say, mindsets. And we all have, certain kind of mindsets. I can share a story about me presenting, or doing a workshop in one of the multinationals. And one of the participants in that, and Radhika, you were there, one of the participants was blind. And I had never considered that in my presentation, that I will have somebody who cannot read my presentation. And it was a very humbling experience that time, on how I always assumed about my audience. And so changing mindsets obviously is very important. But at a business level, changing mindsets of business taking risks. Today, businesses, how they have become is they're taking no risks. They are just following what their neighbor is doing. And that is justified as an industry standard. So businesses have to get out of this whole, the vicious cycle about following what the neighbor is doing. And last, I would say about implementation, which is most important. And we heard a lot of implementation examples here. The correct balance between process and people. And it's very, very important because the people who've left behind have very powerful stories. And Vibha has brought out stories which have, have been very painful, very powerful stories. So process is important, absolutely. Procedure is important, very much. But are we talking about people's story? Are we talking about what they've gone through, what they've suffered? And I think then only the organization is getting into some kind of depth. Otherwise, what we are getting into is Hillary Clinton winning the popular vote and Trump coming to power. We're talking about that kind of data. It adds no value. Or Brexit, or so many examples in the world today. We can measure whatever we want to about diversity, but it adds no value. Till the time we have heard stories, we have collected and compiled stories of people who are impacted by it, and then we know the undercurrents. And I think at that level, at a personal and collective level, where value will come, where a transformation will come. And so this is what I have experienced.
Thank you so much, Rishi. Very quickly, and then I've got to wrap up, but yeah.
I just wanted to say to follow up on what both Vineeta and Rishi were saying was that family-friendly policies are really important. We have our country manager in Sudan. She has flexible working hours, and it works really well for us. And that's really what the Women's Empowerment Principles are all about. They're about gender-balanced, family-friendly policies. And they launched a really amazing gap analysis tool, and I don't expect to score highly on it, but it gives you loads and loads of really good ideas of things that you can do internally to actually strengthen your family-friendly policies.
Yep, and if anybody's interested in learning about the tool, tomorrow, 8:30 a.m., we have a session on human rights, which will dig a bit deeper into the different stakeholder groups and how to respect and support the rights of those stakeholders. And Lauren, who I see in the audience here too, will be presenting this new tool that we launched that Alice just mentioned. So please join us for that. I see I have 4 minutes and 30 seconds left. So what I want to do in those 4 minutes is just talk a little bit about the future, forward-looking, what we can do with this discussion. So I think there's a next slide. So you heard a little bit about action platforms in the plenary, and there's an opportunity for us to build an action platform on the topic of inclusion. And the idea here is to really build on the work that we've done on gender equality. Persons with disabilities, we have a guide coming out with the ILO. I don't know if Geeta's in the room here as well. You know, LGBT, there's so much we can do to build on what we already have, but to look at, and I think this message on behavior change is so key, because it's a common thread that runs across as a key challenge, no matter who we're trying to empower. So some common features of action platforms are that we're really intending to drive action. So to move from the sharing and learning space to actually what can we do as the Global Compact to bring companies together and to actually make a difference and take action. We also think that you'll see across the different action platforms that we're launching, there's an opportunity for advocacy. We think the business has a voice and has influence, and there's a lot of great messages coming out of the United Nations around inclusion. How can we get business behind these messages and help amplify them? I think especially when we talk about inclusion, gender equality, the context is so specific. In India, we're dealing with certain challenges. In Canada, where I'm from, there's challenges there too. The context is specific, and that's why it's so critical that we work with our local networks and take these actions local. And then the other thing is that action platforms are meant to be something that starts with a group of 20 to 40 companies, and it's a time-bound project, but the end result is meant to impact and support the broader Global Compact community. So this is the framework that we're working with. There's already a fruitful discussion brewing here. The question is, how do we turn this into a future-looking area for the Global Compact? So I intended to have more time for an open discussion about this. Unfortunately, we're running short on time, and it's my understanding that I think we're the last ones left before this reception starts. So I'm going to end there, but I'm around, happy to discuss further with anybody who's interested. Leila Karbasi is now in the room, who's Chief of Programs at the UN Global Compact and can provide you with more information about action platforms. All of them, including the inclusion platform. As I mentioned, Sadvi is in the room, who's my partner in crime in this space. And I just want to thank everyone for taking the time for being here, and especially Vipa and our panelists here today. So thank you.